Hello, welcome to this OMG revision video. Today we're going to be looking at paper 2 core vocab on the topic of the challenge of resource management. So right at the start of section C of paper 2. So grab yourself a sheet, either physical one from in school, or you can grab yourself a copy of the worksheet, the core vocab worksheet in the description of this video. Looks like this. So food, what is food? It's any nutritious substance that humans can eat to sustain life. Remember, it's really important for our economic and social well-being. Being healthy enables people to go to school and work. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, recommends that people eat about 2,000 to 2,500 calories to stay healthy, depending on factors like their weight, but also their sex. Water. So what is water? A colourless, transparent liquid that is essential to life. That's the most important part. So a bit like food, it's important to our economic and social well-being, enables people to earn money and educate themselves. And finally, energy, again, really important. It's power derived from physical or chemical change. We normally talk about renewable sources and non-renewable sources of energy. And then sustainability. So sustainability, we focus on food, water and energy in this topic, but being sustainable is providing for people now or current generations without damaging the environment for future generations. So remember our dual coding, a happy tree, a happy adult and a happy child to help us remember that in the exam. Human development is the process of enlarging people's freedoms whilst also improving their social well-being. Translate that into regional geography. We're talking about maintaining people's quality of life or improving people's quality of life and their standard of living. Economic well-being is another way of saying standard of living. When people have their basic survival needs met and have a sustainable income so that they can prosper or afford those basic needs. And social well-being is the basic human needs that allow people to live peacefully in society. Quality of life is a measure of this, thinking about health, education, finance, housing, all of the needs that enable someone to have good social well-being. Global inequalities, we're essentially talking about the development gap, and inequalities generally means unequal. So thinking about how people in HICs have plenty or surplus of things like food, water and energy, whereas people in LICs tend to have less. There is what we call scarcity. High value food exports, so these are agricultural or farming products that are high in value. So an example here, Monge 2 from Kenya, something that is a high value food export. Or we can also think about the cod and herring that's fished in the Barents Sea in Svalbard. That is also a high value food export. The all year demand for seasonal food. So think about the all year demand part, so people needing something all across the year, and then seasonal is to do with something being only part of the year. So people want access to foods that are out of season all year round. So for example, people want strawberries, they might have a nice dessert with their Christmas dinner in December. So there is a demand all year for foods that are seasonal. Organic produce, so that's food that's grown without the use of chemicals, pesticides, and is harvested by hand without the use of machinery. Famously, more environmentally friendly than our current methods of practice, agribusiness, but can be more expensive, and obviously yield can be lower. Carbon footprint, so the total amount of greenhouse gases emitted by our actions. This can either be for an individual or a company, for example, Nike. For example, importing food from another country is going to incur or lead to lots of carbon being emitted in transport, but also the production of that food. So food has a carbon footprint, and that will add to an individual person's carbon footprint. Why? Because of food miles. So food miles, the distance of food travels from where it is grown to the consumer's plate, or from production to consumption. A nice kind of tagline for this used by Tesco: the distance food travels from field to fork. The more food miles that we have on a piece of food, food miles that we have on a piece of food, a product, the more carbon dioxide is associated with that food. Whereas local food is food that is grown in the local area and has low food miles. Obviously better for the environment because of that reduced carbon footprint, but not all food can be grown locally. An example, something like oranges don't grow in the UK climate. And then agribusiness, so this is a typical agribusiness farm. So applying business skills to farming to produce as much food and make as much profit as possible. So think about agri, farming, business, money, farming for maximum profit. As you can see, it involves the use of heavy machinery, will involve the use of chemicals, pesticides, ultimately not really considerate of the environment, focusing on farming for maximum profit. So, can have more negative environmental effects, but yields are higher, so it allows us to meet food demand. On the topic of demand, water demand. Water demand is the volume of water that is requested by people to satisfy their needs. So we can think of that as how much water do we need in order to make sure that the population has enough water. And we can see in the UK, generally, in domestic water use, toilet flushing and bathing are the big two. But then we can also think more wide scale about the UK economy. Households make up nearly 50%. Leaking or leakage is actually the next biggest one, but then we can also think about manufacturing, services. Miscellaneous would include things like farming. Water quality. So water quality refers to the physical, chemical and biological and organoleptic or taste-related properties of water. Simply put, the freshness, how fresh and clean our water is. Now, this is monitored by the Environment Agency through water treatment centres, but also testing of rivers to ensure that our water is of a good quality in the UK. Water pollution management, so these are the different strategies that the environment agencies use. So that can include things like wastewater treatment, so making sure that our wastewater doesn't pollute the environment, monitoring the quality of river water, and strict regulations on the uses of water. Water supply, so we're thinking about the sources of water, where we get our drinking water from. And in the UK, the main sources of water are rivers, reservoirs, and groundwater aquifers. We in Birmingham get our water from a reservoir in mid Wales, there, the Elan Group, and then that water is transferred. So a water surplus is when the supply of water exceeds the demand. For example, in Wales. So in Wales, generally we have quite a low population density, few people, but quite high precipitation. So as a result, there's going to be more water supplied than the population needs. We call that water surplus. Whereas a water deficit is just the opposite. So if you think about an example where the demand for water exceeds the supply, southeast of England, including London, is a good example. So we've generally got quite a high population density compared to quite a low amount of rainfall or precipitation. What that leads to is not having enough water to supply to meet the demand of the population, called water deficit. So the solution to areas of water deficit is water transfer schemes. And that's from when water is moved from an area of surplus to an area of deficit. The solution is effective, but it can have a negative impact on the environment, all the infrastructure that's required to transport water or transfer water from one place to another. A couple of examples. So we have the Elan Group here, as I mentioned earlier, transferring water to Birmingham, London, and the southeast of the UK, receiving water transfers from everywhere really, but mainly some sort of this sort of Wales and sort of mid-England area, the places like the Peak District reservoirs there being used to transfer water to the southeast of the UK. Then our energy mix. This is the range and proportion of different energy sources used by a country. So in any given day or any given year, we'll use different amounts of different sources of fuel in order to produce electricity. So you can see here, this is for the United Kingdom. Most of our energy is coming from oil, a tiny bit from coal in 2020, quite a lot from gas, and then our kind of renewable sources are up here at the top. Whereas previously, so we go back to the 1960s, a lot of it still coming from oil, a lot more coming from that grey area, though coal, and only a tiny bit coming from gas. So the main switch we've kind of made there is, rather than coal being our main source, we've kind of moved more towards gas and oil. Fossil fuels, these are hydrocarbons from your chemistry lessons that can be found naturally occurring in the Earth's crust. They're made up of dead plants and animals and include coal, oil and gas. Importantly, they are non-renewable. More cannot be made by us because it takes hundreds of millions of years to make them, hence the word or the name fossil fuels. Whereas renewable energy, these are natural energy sources that are not depleted. In other words, they won't run out. So things such as water, wind or solar energy. So we in the UK will tend to use more wind energy because we are the windiest nation in Europe. But other countries, for example, Portugal, might utilise solar power more, have energy production such as solar farms. The exploitation of energy sources means to treat something unfairly. So when we extract and burn fossil fuels, we treat the environment unfairly and also people because of those respiratory diseases. We can use exploitation of energy sources simply in the term of using them. And obviously there are opportunities and challenges to every time that we exploit energy sources. Fracking, this is a fairly new method of energy production. It's the process of injecting liquid at a high pressure to force out gas. So gas is stored in shale rock underneath the ground. So water and chemicals are sort of fired into the shale to essentially crack it or fracture it and release the gas. The gas is then collected, but importantly, one kind of environmental concern is that those chemicals, the water and the sand, can cause environmental damage, but also pollute drinking water. So that's it in terms of paper 2 core vocabulary for the challenge of resource management. So once you've watched the video, make sure you use a green pen to go through your answers, make sure they are the best they possibly can be.